I think Dave and I are sort of humbled here to be sitting next to football royalty. Between these two guys, over 100 appearances for the Socceroos. Between David and I, just one appearance at national level when I played for Australia in indoor football in 1984 because the other two goalkeepers were injured. So that's my claim to fame. I will say this, David, congratulations, if we can, before we proceed, to Anthony Graham, Kim Ontario-Doris and the wonderful team at FFV for putting on these amazing community and business awards. You are now officially my favourite Maltese Australian ahead of Kevin Muscat. Well done. These two guys here know Argentina only too well. They know Brazil only too well. Let's wind back the clock to Jeffrey Olver first. Jeff, you were before the golden generation. We'll call it the working generation. You had to work 9 to 5, then play for your country and your club. What are your memories back then?
Yeah, we were the working generation. We work all day, and then we train 4 nights a week. And then we were lucky enough, if we were good enough, to then go and play for our country. And I think our era was a different era. I think we were the previous eras were obviously people that migrated out here. Is where a lot of my team we were born, obviously from immigrants. My parents were from Scotland. But our squad that we had was then the transition of players that learnt their game in Australia. So we were very lucky. We had some great players. Obviously the gentleman sitting to my right. A lot of people in this room probably don't realise that he's probably, they talk about the Harry Kewells and they talk about the Tim Cahills, but those that do remember, when you mention the gentleman's name of Oscar Crino, a lot of people go, ooh. So if you ever get a chance, YouTube, Craig mentioned it a bit earlier on about modern technology. Well, modern technology is very good for us old guys because we can just have the kids go on YouTube and have a look at us. So that's very good from that perspective. So yeah, we were lucky, but we were also a team that Frank Orick was my coach at the time, and the team didn't change that very. We were a bit like a club team, really, and same 7 or 8 played every time we played, and to get in the national team was a lot harder those days than I think it is now.
We were just actually having a chat at the table, and we're working out what these guys would be worth in the current market. And we sussed out that Oscar Crino would without doubt be a marquee player in the A-League if he wasn't overseas. And Jeff, we just couldn't quite sneak you into marquee status, but you were at the top end of the salary cap.
I'll take him to India, where I've been commentating for 2 years as a marquee.
The thing you need to remember, Dave, is this. Goalkeepers are like drummers in a band. If you haven't got one, you can't play music, so you just got to remember that.
Hey, David, it's interesting that Jeff alludes to the migrants, and look, your Croatian background, I'm Greek background, Oscar's Argentinian, Scottish. I mean, we're all WOGs to the country, let's be honest. I mean, WOG stands for Well Organised Greeks, just in case you... There aren't too many WOGs in this room, just quietly, maybe a couple on the Oakley and South Melbourne tables. But you talk about the magic story of immigration. A lot of people wouldn't realise that Oscar Crino landed in Melbourne as an 11-year-old, and I don't think you'd never been to the beach before. You arrived here in Australia as an 11-year-old in Melbourne.
Yeah, yes, I did. I was born in Buenos Aires, and Argentina's economy wasn't that good, so my father did what a lot of migrants did, got 5 suitcases together, and my piano accordion, which I don't like anyway, but I had to bring that as well. So, so we landed here, and I was a little bit disappointed when we landed here because all we could see from the aeroplanes was sticks on the ovals. And my father had promised me that they played soccer here, and I said, I think you fooled us, we should go back. And he said, no, just be patient. Anyway, so my journey started like that back in 73, 74. We lived as a migrant family in Clayton. And in Argentina, we lived far away from the beach. So, there was a bus that used to park outside our home in Clayton that said Elwood Beach. So we asked my father if he could take us as soon as the weather got better, because we landed here in July. So in our first trip there, we were like the Beverly Hillbillies, we just packed an esky, 5 kids, and 2 parents obviously, and we went to Elwood Beach. But our culture in Argentina is that if you see a ball, you're entitled to be part of the game, and you know, and show off your wares, because that's how you get your identity on the streets and all that sort of stuff. And I was lucky enough that day at Nutwood Beach, there was an adults game happening, and little did I know then that a lot of those guys were ex or current Socceroos. They were just having a picnic, and they had this game going. And the culture where I was brought up was that if there's a ball on the street, all you do is just queue up by the side of the street and you will get a game. So anyway, I stood by the side of this game. All these adults were playing. They're all really good players. They didn't give me a look in, you know. I was standing on one side for 10 minutes. I went to the other side for another 10 minutes. And no one invited me into the game, you know. My old man, you know, he's looking at me and says, well, jump in. I said, well, they're not letting me in. So I thought of something, you know. They were playing with small goals, so I went behind the goals. So every time they missed, I grabbed the ball, but I juggled this ball for about 5 minutes, you know, and I showed them that I could juggle the ball and this and that, the other, and I do all the tricks. And, you know, they got a bit frustrated a couple of times, and I said, give the ball back, you know. And mind you, that happened to be my career after that. Even when I played for the Socceroos, I wasn't going to give it too many times. But so they invited me into this little five-a-side game, and you know, they said, you know, they called me Boy. They said, Boy, can you play? I said, of course I can play. And happened to be my coach from Footscray there. And after the game, you know, he said to my father, he says, where do you guys come from? He said, oh, look, we've just only been in Australia for two or 3 months. You know, he goes, your kid can play. He goes, yeah, we know. But you're from Footscray. You live in Clayton, you know. I said, my son, I'm not sure if he can go there. And I work afternoon shift, so I can't take him there for training. So what they did, basically, we went away, and then the coach rocked up with a whole lot of gear, Adidas gear and boots and everything in my house, and said, look, I want your son to play for Footscray, and I will teach him how to get on a train. And because it was my dream to be a professional footballer anyway, so he taught me from Clayton to Footscray till I was about 15 on my own type of thing. And yeah, you know, like Craig said before, you know, there was, where the streets where I grew up, there was your escape. You know, the escape is, if your parents are poor, you make a first division team, you might be wealthy, and you could do something good for the community as well. Anyway, so that's my journey, and then eventually I had the pleasure of playing for the Socceroos, and hopefully inspired a few kids to play, because like Jeff said, we were the sort of pioneers who took over a generation that wasn't doing all that well because Australia was not qualifying, and then we also had to show people that the game could be played differently, because the methods that were taught here in those days were, I wouldn't say primitive or anything like that, but it was, they weren't exactly very modern compared to what they were doing in South America or parts of Europe. So, but a lot of us learned that, and we instilled it in that Socceroo team, and we had the great pleasure to have taken Australia for the first time to the Olympics in Seoul, and that was very gratifying for me and all my colleagues, because, you know, we thought that we owed it to this great country to put it on the map, you know, and the game is big and we wanted it to be shown.
Oscar, I'll never forget those Olympics. Well said, Oscar. We beat Yugoslavia 1-0, the gold medal favourites. I think Davo played a ball to Farina. I'll never forget that day, the day I got married, so I'll never forget my wedding anniversary. Australia won, Yugoslavia 0. Happy wedding anniversary, Jane. I'm happily married, so, you know, still married to Jane. She just came back from overseas, and she goes, you love football so much, you're going to Melbourne for the function? I said, yes. She goes, well, we're going to play FIFA now. I said, what's that? She goes, like the referee. She got my shaving cream, went around the bed, sprayed the bed in one white line. She goes, now you can't come inside 9 metres. Now, pizza. Let's go back to this fateful night. The lineup was Olver, Yankos, Dunn, Sharvor, Jennings, Davidson, Wade, Bozanowski, Farina, Arnold. Congratulations to your old mate in Sydney FC, Tony Pinata. The bar has been well and truly raised in the Hyundai A-League. And Ola and Shaw. Unfortunately, Oscar had a leg infection. He was in hospital You're playing Argentina, you're probably thinking, who can I swap shirts with? You're not thinking, we're going to belt this team and belt them convincingly.
Yeah, it was, well, for those that don't know, it was 1988, the Bicentennial Gold Cup. So the three teams were involved was Brazil, Argentina and Saudi Arabia. We played Brazil in the first game in Melbourne. Wet night, I remember. Oscar played and we got beat 1-0. There was this guy, apparently wasn't a bad player, a guy called Romario scored. We lost 1-0 and then we played against the Saudi Arabians and we beat them 3-0 at Parramatta Stadium. And then we were drawn against Argentina. At that time, Argentina were the world champions. There were seven players in that starting 11 had won the World Cup in '86. So like everybody else, I said, oh, you've got no chance. But I think the belief that we had as a squad, and obviously we had Frank Elrock and Eddie Thompson was part of the coaching staff, and we went into the game. And Andy, I remember, Les was commentating, Johnny Warren was commentating, and Andy was on the side.
Chasing Paul Wade after the goal.
Chasing Paul Wade. So cut long story short, we scored early, Wadey scored. We went 1-0 up, and then Argentina equalised. And then a very good mate of mine, and Charlie Yankos, if you ever get a chance, if you haven't seen the goal, please do go on YouTube. He knocks this goal in from about 35 yards. And I speak to Charlie every time, so every time we go out, he just pulls a copy of it out of his pocket and shows the people. But, and he scores a great goal. We go 2-1 ahead. And then Frank Farina on the breakaway gets a penalty. Charlie steps up, scores 3-1. Then Vlado Bozanowski, probably the most famous goal from a substitute ever scored. He went on, made a career from it. Scored first game, come on, we won 4-1. The beauty of those games were we had a gentleman by the name of Martin Tyler was the commentating the games. They flew Martin in from England. So now I've had the old VHS transferred over to the CDs and you can listen occasionally. And so we had Martin Tyler commentating on the game. The thing about that night, Andy, as you probably remember, was the aftermath was the recovery wasn't too much of ice baths and so on. We were staying in the luxury then of the Camperdown Travelodge opposite the Sydney University. So I remember going back, and honest to God, the story gets better with age, but there was at least 2,000 or 3,000 people at the Camperdown Travelodge waiting for us when we got back. And Frank Elrock, great man, Frank's still alive, and I appreciate everything he did for me because he gave me my opportunity to play for my country. And I remember Frank going, boys, excuse my language if I swear, I don't give a F what you do tonight. You can go and do whatever you want because we've just beaten the world champions, which we did. So we went out, and the funniest thing I always remember was that Charlie scored the goal, and I was rooming with Charlie, and Charlie had to get up at 6 o'clock for radio TV. And there's me, Mickey Gibson, and a few of the other lads were walking in at 6:30 in the morning. Morning, Frank, how are we? And cut a long story short, we paid for it that afternoon with some hill runs. So then we went on and played Argentina. We then obviously beat them, and we ended up going to Brazil in the final, which was a great day.
And Oscar, that tournament mixed emotions for you. Obviously got to play against Brazil, but yeah, it got, I guess, couldn't fulfil a boyhood dream thereafter.
No, well, I played in the '81 World Cup against the junior side, which we won, and again, that game there put us on the map. But look, it was tough because I had two great games actually, and against Melbourne, here in Melbourne, when we played Brazil, I was telling my beautiful partner that yesterday that there was a headline in the Italian papers here that even though Australia lost, it said the most Brazilian that night was Oscar, you know, and so I went on to play Saudi Arabia and played very well, and we were all happy after that game because we knew we had to get a draw against Argentina and we'll go into the final and all the rest of it. But we went out, had a few drinks, like any other nights after the games, and then we had to report the day after for training. But I developed an infection on my leg. I'm not sure what caused it in the end, but I was hospitalised for about 4 days, and they let me out for the Argentine game for me to look at it. and be
What
part
did you guys get up to that night?
lots of
All I can say, Dave, is this: thank God mobile phones weren't around in our day. That's all I can say.
Dave, just to sum that up, I was at SBS at 8:30. Les Murray walked in about 8:45 and he looked at me and goes, Andy, I admire your diligence for being here early to do your story for the sports show that night. Little did he know, went straight to SBS with no sleep. But my uncle Stavros was working the cabs that night. He got me there very quickly. David, while I got you, just bringing it forward, you look at our World Cup qualifying now, we're in third in our group. If it stays like that, and we play the fifth place team in South America, that fifth place team is Argentina at the moment. Scary.
Yeah, I think we're in we take on CONCACAF. In
We don't go that way.
No,
that's better still. So we'll get Venezuela then.
USA.
USA.
USA's fourth at the moment.
South America.
In the other group. But,
we don't want to be in a playoff situation. I mean,
No.
were you happy with the performance last night?
Yeah, look, I mean, it was really nervy. But the important thing is, Andy, that we're third on goal difference. We're all on 16 points with Saudi Arabia and Japan. It was really nervy in the first half. Ange Postecoglou at half-time, I guess everyone expected him to give him a bit of a rocket, but apparently he was quite relaxed and told the players, you're quite anxious, just settle down, keep playing, and then obviously they got on top in the second half with, Rogic in particular and Moy starting to control the game, and his substitutions were very good. So look, obviously the next game is absolutely vital, away to Japan, August 31. Japan's got another game in a few days' time, but I get the sense that probably 4 or 5 of our players will move clubs in that time. I think there'll be some good moves, highlighted by Aaron Moy, who'll move to a Premier League club, and 1 or 2 others. Jackson Irvine will probably go to a top-end championship club. Mitch Langerak will be, even though he's on the bench, he'll move to Stuttgart, to the Bundesliga rather, put some more pressure on Matty Ryan. So I think we'll be well placed come that international window, and then we finish off against Thailand to finish off strongly and finish in the top 2.
We look forward to reading your reports in the Herald Sun. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank David, please thank Oscar, and thank you to Jeffrey as well.
Thank you.
2 of the great legends in our game and the third legend in the media.